Well, good afternoon or good evening, everyone. Thanks so much for tuning in to IFYL. That's Inspirations for Your Life. So glad that you popped in. If you're new to us, go ahead and grab your phone if you're watching us and launch that camera app, point it over the QR code, touch the yellow lips, and you'll get directed over to my link tree with lots of great information. But if you're listening to us and you can't see us, it's on the podcast, then just go to believemeachieve.com because remember, we need to believe in ourselves before we can actually be able to have others believe in us and before we can ever achieve our goals. We have a great master topic, but before I get to that and to our great guest today, I want to just let you know that I thank you for coming back, for watching us, for supporting us. Really been great to have you here. Thank you if you're on the replays, 1 a.m., 1 p.m., 3 a.m., 3 p.m., 10 a.m., 10 p.m., 12 midnight, 12 noon. Whenever you decide to watch us, thank you so much for making the choice to have Inspirations for Your Life part of your day. I know you guys are busy, and I know your mental diet is really important. So let's get over to our master topic, understanding leadership. Wow. Series 2, that means we're in our second year. We are on episode number 3. I don't know where the time has gone. But like I said, we have a great guest, ladies and gentlemen. His name is Dr. Steve Yacovelli. He is an emotional intelligence and inclusion expert focusing on organizational leadership and change management. He is an award-winning author and speaker, and Steve is striving to make the world more empathetic and inclusive. Steve and Top Dog have had the pleasure of working with some great client partners and really trying to help them increase what they do, but most importantly, be sure that they are including everyone in all things that they do. And now, ladies and gentlemen, please help me welcome to Inspirations for Your Life stage, Mr. Dr. Stephen Yacovelli. Hey, Steve, how are you?
Good, John. How are you?
It's great to have you here. I know we had some challenges going back and forth, our schedule, my schedule, your schedule, the holidays. How were your holidays, by the way?
It was nice. Yeah, I'm here in Orlando, Florida, and it was nice and not as hot as it would be, so that was kind of nice.
All right. So, I have to ask you, when you talk about, leadership and, inclusion and all that great thing, which is amazing because a lot of people, they actually alienate people. And I have a very strict clause at all my businesses and also at anything that I do for charity. And it's a charter. And
Yeah.
I tell people, if you don't like it, there's a door. And basically, it says we will not discriminate for race, religion, sexual orientation, color, creed, motto, anything. And if somebody does do something wrong, such as they say something like an offensive joke, we'll take it that they didn't understand it. And we'll say, look, we understand. Just want to let you know what that did and how that might have hurt someone. So we're going to write that up. If it happens again, we're just going to let you know we cannot unwind this. So make sure you understand it today. You ask all the questions because after today, it's like, that's it. Like we can't forgive it. And I have to ask you, what got you involved with leadership? Why did you want to do that? I mean, everybody wants to make the world a better place, but why did you want to get into leadership? I have to ask.
It actually started, my master's degree is in educational policy and leadership. So I kind of went down the path of the formal schooling, if you will. But that was prompted because, I was in business. I didn't do the whole undergrad to graduate degree thing. I kind of took some time and actually went into the workforce. And I saw how some leaders that I worked with, that I reported to, were just amazing, really smart, very, understanding of people, listeners, etc. And I saw a few who were just horrible. And so when I decided to get my master's degree, I'm like, I want to study what's making one person better than the other. And that kind of led me down that path. And at one point, right after that degree, I found myself actually working for the Walt Disney Company. And I worked specifically for Disney Cruise Line, and I was an internal leadership consultant. So I really had to roll up my sleeves and dive deep into helping leaders be even more effective than they already are. And that was kind of my path ever since. I had multiple roles, eventually started my own business 15 years ago as my full-time gig. But every role I've had has been consistent about helping leaders to be even more awesome than they already are. And it's just been really become a passion of mine.
So I always say, I don't work at all. The only time I work, I think, is the day before taxes. I just creatively play, and people give me checks for playing. It's
fun.
great. I never got paid to play in the sandbox.
Very true.
But I think, what you said has a lot of resonance. I know one of the companies I started, not to go through my whole history, but the one company I own is an IT and tech company. I'm an engineer. I do a lot of things. And later I went back to get my bachelor's in education and also clinical hypnosis and neurolinguistic programming. And so I got very passionate a while back, but I didn't know what to do with it. And then I had the largest marketing and advertising company working for me. I mean, I won't mention their name out of respect, but they were just ripping my father and I off when I wasn't even making a penny. He kept paying them. And it's the kind of company where they would, if you gave them $100, let's just say that was the number, they would
Right.
take you for Dunkin' Donuts. Okay. If you gave them 500, well, we're going to go for, I don't know, Bennigan's and dessert. If you gave them the $1,000, oh, we're going to go to Ruth Chris. And I tried this one time, Dr. Steve. I actually said to them, look, I'm going to send you, let's say, just the $500. And I knew they were going to take me to Bennigan's. But I sent them $1,000. They called me back and they said, oh, John, they said, Paul's actually got a slight issue. I don't know if you know about Michael and Joseph. No, I don't. Well, they're twins. And Katie actually is taking them to the doctor. And like, I don't know how this resonates with you.
Okay.
Well, he actually got into an accident last week, and this is the only car that they have. So Katie needs him to come home and take them both to the pediatrician. I'm like, okay, I still don't know how I
Right. Here's a connection.
Unfortunately, he can't meet you for breakfast or lunch because they're going to be tied up, and then the boss is coming. I'm like, all right, no problem. We'll just do it another time. Well, no. I got you booked for the last appointment at Ruth Chris. Oh. Now, I did it the other way around. I said I was sending 1,000 and I just sent them 100, and magically they couldn't see me there. And then they only had time to fit me in. So
Right.
I just thought that was comical. And I decided, like you said, the one thing that they were doing wrong, what were they doing wrong, these marketing advertising companies? They were lying, cheating, stealing, and they weren't even printing in-house, Steve. They were literally just lying about deadlines, all kinds of stuff. And I said, if I do something like this someday, not that I'm ever going to be crazy enough to do this, I am going to make sure that I know how to print.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do everything in-house. And so I decided a while back, 14, 15 years, to start a mom and pop print shop. Went to Xerox, said, how do I do this? Long story short. And I failed miserably for 2 years. But I got into it just because of what you said. There was no one doing what I needed. And I think that's a problem, right? We don't get into doing something until it's a problem, right? It's like when it's a problem and we're so, let's say, ingratiated with that pain, because I say people do things for two reasons: to avoid pain and gain pleasure. That's why our hospitals are so busy. And so we want to be able to do something. Most people, they want to get out of pain. Like I wanted to be able to have my message marketed, have postcards sent out, and I didn't want the pain of having to deal with companies that lied, that got copy wrong, that had rush fees. I'm like, we come up with an idea, the team puts it together, and it's printed that night. I walk in the morning, it's on the press, and I roll it next door to the mail department, which is the post office right next door to me, and it's mailed out the next day. So that's a pretty cool thing. So I want to ask you, what's the most important thing when we think about leadership? Because you've been doing that a while.
Yep.
What would you say is the most important thing? If you had to name, I don't know, maybe 3 things that you would say are the core to a good leader today?
Well, all leaders, at the end of the day, the big, massive, shiny secret with effective leadership is you build trust. Period. That's, my latest book, Pride Leadership. I could have probably saved my printer, as you talk about printers, or my publisher, a lot of time and energy and put one word on one page, although that's not very good for selling books, but it's building trust. And now, okay, so that's that's the end game, Steve. What do? Well, you start to look at engaging with empathy with those around you. You start to think about how you're effectively communicating. You think about how you're building those relationships on a day-to-day basis. You think about how you are being a courageous leader, how you're being an authentic leader. All of these different steps, all these different pieces and parts ultimately lead you down the path of garnering trust with those around you. And that's really the big secret behind successful leadership.
So trust is always very important. We learned this from Dale Carnegie, and strive to become genuinely interested in the other person. Get to know their name first. Like their name is the most important thing. And if you don't say it properly, ask the person, how do I say your name? I don't want to
Yeah,
botch it up. Like, and I think people appreciate when you do that.
sure.
But I have to ask you, a lot of people say, I got to lead by example. Sometimes we lead by the wrong example. What would you say to that?
Well, I think it's so true. When you're a leader, you are constantly on stage. The spotlight is always on you. And let me take a second here to define leader. And yes, leader can be the person who's on the org chart at a certain level or whatever, has direct reports. Leaders can be individual contributors. Leaders can be anyone who has influence within the workplace. And so, anyone who is listening to this or watching this, you are a leader in some way, shape, or form within your workplace. And so you are always on stage, people always watching. And I think smart leaders know this. Smart leaders are going to make mistakes. Of course you are. You're a human. That's how it works. But if you do make mistakes, own them. Say, you know what? Wow, I didn't run that meeting the best. Or you know what? I was a bit, angry and I had a really bad day, and I'm sorry I brought that out on you. Humility is a fantastic leadership trait to have. And so I think smart leaders know they're going to mess up, own what they do and say, and then kind of move on. And hopefully people will engage with them in that authenticity and build that trust with them as well.
Yeah, I kind of lost that perfect gene. I don't think I ever had it, but I think nobody has the perfect
I
gene,
don't
right?
think anyone has.
We're all doing the best we can, and this inspired me to something that was really good. It's called the sandwich technique. Everybody
Mm,
says, you're not good at what you're doing. I always say to people, we got to stroke their ego a little bit. Hey, Michael, you are doing a phenomenal job here on the plant. You're one of our best employees. And I noticed that you're actually ahead of schedule on the production line, which I think is like really good. You're one of the first employees we've had in quite a while that's actually had all the correct things in the right boxes, had them all assembled, and been 50% ahead of schedule. And in the same token, when you put those boxes, on the line, it's really important that we put them on the right area, because we've been noticing from FedEx, UPS, and our other carriers that about half of your boxes are actually getting on the wrong truck. They're shipping somewhere, and then people are complaining because they didn't get it. Half of them are canceling the order
mm.
because they think we never shipped it. So if we could just have you, maybe as you're putting those things aside, maybe just take a few extra minutes and maybe double check, like before you put it on 122, is it really 122? And just double check it maybe twice. Because once you put it on that chute, there's no way for us to get it back. It's like it goes into an abyss. And then, Michael, I think you're doing great. And if you could just do that tweak and with your attitude on the floor, I know that you're going to be a manager just like many of us someday.
So, John, I have to refute that and go against your sandwich.
All right. Okay.
So one of the things that we teach in our classes is not to do the sandwich. And while there's a lot
All
of
right.
folks, and there's differing schools of thought, and I get it, but one of the challenges with the sandwich are twofold. The first is it can mix up the message. So your employee with the printing and then putting in the boxes and stuff might hear just the last bun, because of sandwich, if those who don't know, it's like, start with the positive, give that negative, and end with the positive, bun, meat, bun. Well, that last bun could be the only thing they hear. So it's like, cool, John said I did good, see ya. And then they don't necessarily hear that meat in the middle of that sandwich. That's one challenge to the feedback sandwich. The other is, you know who Pavlov is, of course, I assume.
Absolutely. Pavlov and the dog and ringing the bell and
Yes.
classical conditioning.
Exactly right. Father of behavioral psychology. So Pavlov had dogs, rang the bell, realized they were hungry when he fed them. And for those who don't know, and then said, hey, I'll feed them and ring the bell. And the dog's like salivating. Oh, that's awesome. And then he just rang the bell and didn't feed the dogs, and they still salivated. Conditioned response. We are conditioned responding everyone around us in the workplace, especially as a leader. And so if I'm doing the feedback sandwich, hey, John, when you ran that departmental meeting, you did a great job. However, and then, hey, John, when you were did that project, you did a really nice job, but you missed. And so now I'm conditioning the person when I'm giving that feedback to ignore the top bun, which might be awesome feedback for them to have. So, I always say that if there's two pieces of positive feedback, the buns, and one negative feedback, the meat, you say, hey, I have two pieces of positive feedback, one corrective. Which ones do you want first? And then, so one of my students one time said, oh, an open face sandwich. I'm like, Sure, that's a great way to think about it. So the sandwich is okay, but be careful if you're doing it in the traditional sense. It can really condition people differently, or they can just hear that bottom bun.
Okay. And I think the other most important thing, I'm sure you'd agree with me, is that we always want to take them aside and not give them their feedback in front of the line. If it's good feedback, that's great to do on the line. But if there's something corrective, I think it's good to pull them off the line and invite them into your office to go over what it is that they might need to tweak. And I always say we don't want to tweak the person because there's nothing wrong with the person.
Right.
We want to change your behavior. I think you're a great person. It's just the behavior of you putting the boxes in the wrong bin could cause us some financial
Right.
issues.
I would absolutely agree with that, with a big sloppy legal asterisk on it.
Okay.
Only
Okay.
because, for example, if I'm like, oh, you did such a great job, I'm going to praise you in public. Some people do not want that. And it's actually going to alienate them away. They don't want that spotlight or an embarrassment. So, again, asterisk there.
So it almost reminds you, there's something I did in one of our interviews a while back, which was called CCF, Continuous Constructive Feedback.
Mhm.
So when we hire and go through the process, we always find out how would they like CCF. If they don't, we don't want to bring them on the team. That's like kind of like an out, because we want to make sure they're going to work. And I guess another thing from what I'm hearing you saying is probably we should also ask them, hey, so when we give this to you, do you want to get positive feedback in public? Is
100%.
that okay?
100%. Yep. Yeah. And I think
that's a good point.
And Joe, and just to kind of close the loop on that, for some other folks, yes, if you have some change, as we say, or criticism behavior, and you give it to the person, but if it's something that could add value to the team, then you can also say, hey, thank you for this. Is it okay at our next team meeting we share this feedback so we all can learn from it? And if you're creating a culture of trust, that individual employee is like, you know what? Okay, yeah, I see how we can all learn from this. So then that's the other asterisk with the, you criticize in private, praise in public asterisk. Sometimes the criticism might be good for everybody to hear. So, again, to your exact point, John, it's having those conversations with that individual to say, what kind of feedback, where do you want the feedback, and can we make this a learning opportunity for the rest of the team?
That reminded me of something. The first time I did a project, I was out of college, and I was doing a consulting project for IBM.
Yay!
And when I was doing that, they well, that was when they had billions of dollars to spend, right? And they would fly you first class, and they would just pay you to go out. Leave on Sunday. By the way, we don't need you to do anything till Wednesday, but we're going to pay you for Sunday, Monday, and Tuesday, and we're going to put you first class. Go have some fun. Oh, by the way, only need you to do it Wednesday and Thursday. Take Friday off and fly back on Saturday if you want on us. And so, what was interesting is there was a lady, and I was giving her some feedback about a concept I had, just a thought. I mean, it might be useless, but I mean, I wasn't an expert trainer. I was just a novice, right? I wasn't a train the trainer, and you have to be careful because you don't want to step on people's toes. And so I said, I'll just call the lady Mary. That wasn't her name. Hey, Mary, I just had a possible thought. Would I share with you? Oh, you can, but remember, you're not a T3. You're only a beginner. I'm like, I understand. I'm just a nobody, but we'll listen to it. So she listens to it. She's like, yeah. She's like, it's exactly what I thought. It goes totally against our philosophy, and you don't get it because you haven't had education and all that. I'm like, you're right. I haven't gotten an educational degree yet. Didn't do it yet. And so then they're actually the ones that made me go back to get the educational degree because they decided they didn't want to pay me to keep doing consulting for them if I didn't have an educational degree, which I thought was kind of crazy. So anyway, we have what they call train the trainer, like conference calls. And so we had a conference call that night. Not a video call, just a conference call. And I was at the cafeteria, and this a gentleman comes up to me, and he says, "You're John Morley." I said, "Yes." I said, "You're such and such. You're the vice president of training." I said, "Yes." And development. He says, "Yes." He said, "You have a minute?" I said, "Yes, I do." He says, "Well, how do you think the program's going?" Yada yada. And he says, I was just wondering, do you have any new ideas or insights? Because he was curious. He heard about me that I did something. So I shared some of my slop, and I said, it's a mess. He says, John, this is really good. I said, well, don't think it's too good because I presented to Mary, and she already told me that it's totally off base with IBM's culture. Well, John, I want to beg to differ with her, and I'd like to ask your permission if we could bring your notebook to tonight's, then they're going to do a video thing to bring it to tonight's call. Would that be okay? yeah, I just don't want Mary to fire me. Oh, don't worry, Mary's not going to do anything to you. I'm going to suggest that we bring it. You didn't ask me. I'm telling her that we're bringing it. After that meeting, I was like really nervous. The next thing that happened was everyone liked it. The next thing she loved it. The next day he comes back to me, he says, John, he says, we thought the plan was great. I said, well, thank you, sir. I really appreciate that. He says, and I'm going to recommend to Mary. Well, I'm not going to recommend. I'm going to tell Mary that your program is going to be the master template for the 1500 singular wireless AT&T conversion training rollout. So now I just got the hat of training 1,500 people, training the trainers. Remember, I was just a basic trainer.
Right.
And she's like, don't get too happy. She's like, you could be fired just as quickly as you were hired. So I said, I understand. I'm just kind of learning. And, and I think people, they don't quite get it. I'll tell you that you're right about the fact that I guess we have to ask people, not just, like I said, the CCF, but we got to ask them, I guess, how they want to get their feedback. I think that's excellent. And that they may want to get they may want to get positive and negative feedback. We have to find out, I guess that's a great question to ask during the interview. And that shouldn't preclude us to hiring or firing them. But when somebody doesn't want CCF, I kind of move away from them because they're not going to be a good team player.
Sure.
So I think it's but a lot of people, today, especially, and not to single out any person or anything, but the millennial generation, which is like a generation before it, they're different, aren't they? They want a different expectation to leadership. How would you approach that? It's like they want it their way, but they're not adaptable to your change. How would you? I know that's a loaded question.
Yeah, it's a loaded because I do a lot of diversity training and inclusive leadership. So I've gotten away from saying, oh, millennials are like this and Gen X are like that, just because I have always found an exception to every darn rule. One of my best friends is a baby boomer and is more tech savvy than I am, and my doctorate's in distance learning. So I kind of stay away from those things. I will say, though, that you do see some trends in some demographics in how they want to approach the workplace in general. Some are much more, I don't want that hand holding. I don't want that, if you're familiar with situational leadership, really having that director kind of approach, versus some are just like, hey, you know what? Just like give me the assignment, delegate it to me, and I'm out of here. Thank you very much. I don't need your guidance.
I like the way you referred to it. It's really the demographics. So it's not the person, it's the demographics of the people.
And I think that personality type can transcend generations. So you have those people who really want to have the bullet point number one, bullet point number two kind of way of being delegated a task or being led, or that laissez-faire attitude as the leader. It just really depends on the individual. And we used to do training with my business on age and generations, and I threw it out. Because I'm like, you know what? I think this can perpetuate stereotypes. I don't like that.
Yep.
So I tell leaders, hey, you know what? Sure, you have someone who's a millennial coming into your team. You don't make assumptions. Ask them. Get to know them as an individual, and then you can start to tailor your leadership style to best meet their needs and support them as best you can.
You mentioned before when we started, and I firmly agree with this, is trust. Anyone who does not want to build trust is a problem. And I use an example for this. We all network. And I remember my beginning days of network. We're talking, my one company's 30 years young. And so when I started that company, it's 30 years, but let's say I was networking, not the first year, maybe 20, maybe 28 years ago, because the first year or two, you're kind of like just kind of feeling your oats a little bit. And I remember going on a ship, the 3-tier ship. The tickets back then were about $50 if you bought them online, and I think it was like $75 if you bought them at the ship. Today, that same ship is $150 online, and I think it's close to $185 on the ship if they have room.
Right.
But the thing that was very interesting about the ship, Dr. Steve, is that when I got on the ship and I'm talking to somebody like you, and all of a sudden, this person comes up to me and throws this thing in my face, right? They throw this card. Oh, here, just take my card. Like, excuse me, I'm talking with Michael here. Can you give us a minute? Yeah, I just take my card. We'll talk later. I said, okay, I'll take your card, and I'll tell you what, I'm going to put it in my left pocket. Yeah, I don't care. But if you wait, I'm actually going to put it in my top pocket. I don't care what pocket you put it. Well, you actually should. Because see, when I get off the boat, everything in this pocket, including the garbage that I also put in there and the wrappers, they're going to get thrown in the barrel as I walk off the ship.
Nice.
And so I think relationships. I was having a conversation with a gentleman today. I'm also president of a chamber, 501c3 that I started, and I said, we're about relationships. You don't have to promise anything, but I don't want you to abuse the members. I don't want you to lie, cheat, steal. I don't want you to pretend to be something you're not, and then the member is expecting that, and now you're totally off base. Or I find out that you're email blasting people, and they never gave you permission.
Mm.
So I think being honest is a real important thing, and keeping your team a priority, I think, is another one. Yep, I see it right there. Yes.
Yeah, and for those who aren't being able to watch, I just changed my background. This is the 6 leadership competencies I talk about in my book, Pride Leadership. And they're the things I've witnessed over the 30 or almost 30 years of doing this. And it's, the 6 competencies are authenticity, courage, empathy, communication, relationships, and culture. And I found that if you're looking for a place to focus as a leader, focus on these 6. And you were just absolutely talking about relationships, and all of these help foster that trust with those around you.
So we didn't talk about this today, but I'm sure we'll probably have to invite you to come back another time because I do read. The one thing I do as a guest hosting the show is I do something no one does. When I bring guests on and I interview them about their book, which I'm not doing today,
Yep.
I read the book from cover to cover.
Nice.
I just ask them to send me the book. And I literally got 12 books right now I'm behind on. There was a book I had to read 6 months ago. It took me 4 months to read it. It was The Psychology of Killing with Drones. And I told my PR team, and I'm like, I wanted to do this. Like, oh, John, you're studying drones. I'm like, yeah, this will be great. I had no idea what I was getting myself involved with.
Yeah.
And it was so, and all of a sudden, you come to the dinner table and your significant other says to you, how was your day? Oh, it was fine. We killed a few people. Could you pass the salt and the ketchup, please? And you have to realize, I guess, where that's going. But the other thing I want to talk about is your group and the priority. I think that becomes a problem for some people, and I'm going to tie it to accountability. What do you think on that, Dr. Steve?
Repeat that for me, John. I'm not sure.
So keeping your team a priority. And then relating that to accountability and, let's say, also delegation. Because I find that if you just are a delegator or you're just an order giver, you're not really a leader, you're a dictator. So I always feel you've got to balance, right? You got to balance those. You got to balance those strengths.
Yeah, I think it's not just the leader's opportunity though to hold accountability. It's really the whole team. And I think that's when you start to create, and I'm sure at some point you've all talked about the Tuckman model, the forming, storming, norming, performing kind of thing. And if not, we can have a chat about that. But basically, when you have a team, your goal is to get to that high performance spot. But you can't do that until you get through the, forming is where, I'm, of course, top dog. We always use dog analogies. It's like if you're at the dog park, dogs are like kind of sniffing each other, checking each other out. Like, that's the forming stage. Storming is, it doesn't necessarily have to be super bad, but it's like the dust is flying everywhere. We're trying to figure each other out. Like, what's your role? What's my role? Who's doing what? And then norming, kind of that all settles down. And then you get to performing. And I think when you're going through those stages of team development, team dynamics, you're holding each other accountable throughout the process. And when you get to that high performance, smart teams know that it's not just the leader's job to make sure the stuff gets done. And that's where that whole trust thing comes into the play is, hey, I trust that my team member is going to do the part of the project that they said they would. And if they don't, then sure, the boss or the leader or whoever might come in and hold them accountable. But I think it's up to me too, because we're working together, that I can also take that opportunity to hold them accountable. So I think accountability is really a team effort. But of course, the ultimate accountability is up to the leader of the team.
And when something doesn't go well, they have to know that there's a support system that they can fall back on.
Right.
One of the things I do, I run a lot of different things, and I also run about 7 internship programs at the different companies. And one of them we run is a marketing internship. We got about 22 people in the marketing internship. And these are people from college, usually sophomores, juniors, seniors. We also have video internships. And what I tell people is once you've gone through interview 1, then interview 2, interview 3, first of all, if you miss an interview, you're done. Like, just don't even call us. Like, you're just done. Just don't even bother. Just like you're done. And once they finally get on the team, we call it the onboarding process. We tell them, here's your access. We're going to use Slack. You have access to all of us, especially myself. You can message us anytime you want, but after 10 o'clock, please don't message us. It'll go to silent mode unless you have a real problem. If you have to call us, don't call after 10 unless it's an emergency. But realize we're a resource for you.
Yeah.
And don't come to me on May 1st when it was due on April 28th because you were too busy going to a ball game because you didn't see the priority of our team because it just was, I don't know, it just didn't cycle in your hemisphere at that moment, but later on it might. Yeah, I call these people, they kind of take siestas up to the North Pole or to the nebula in space. And then they come back like, oh, I guess I'm back on Earth now. And I think when you start to let people know that they have this system, I find it works out really well. I'll tell you that if 1,000 people come through the system and we bring on, let's say for every 1,000, we bring on 2 or 3. Out of the 20 or 25 that we get, one of them doesn't work out. And it's usually because not that they don't understand the process, but that they lied to themselves, not to us, in what they were going to commit to do.
Right.
And they're already looking to shirk responsibilities. So what I do with these people, I'm like, look, this may not be working for you, which is okay. It's perfectly fine. And I just want to thank you because hopefully I've helped you become a better version of yourself. You've helped become a better version of myself. I want to end with one other quick thing before I wrap with you. And that was this. One of my first jobs I took was at a government agency, unfortunately. And I was there, took a job called Technical Services Coordinator because they didn't want to pay me a lot more money. So they just called me a TSC because they didn't really need to know a lot, even though I was an engineer. They didn't want to say engineer because they could never afford me.
Right.
And so I was a TSC. I was the guy that handled ordering, but yet I handled tech issues. And but I was just a TSC. But to them, it was like a nobody. It was like I was probably lower than the garbage man. The garbage man was higher than me. And so
there's nothing wrong with garbage people. Nothing wrong with them.
No, they're great people. I think I'm just saying the way they treat them. That's another thing I would say. So whether you're a CEO, whether you're a garbage person, I treat everyone with respect. But I'm saying now, not in my eyes, in their eyes, because that goes against what I believe. But hey, I can't rewrite their rules. So, one time I was going to one of the schools and it usually takes me 15 minutes. Well, one day it took me 22 minutes and 30 seconds. I parked the car, came back. I signed in manually. They didn't have an automatic time clock. And she said, John, where were you? I left the school back here. It's 22 minutes and 30 seconds. You should have been back here in 15 minutes. What happened? Well, let me sit down. Let me see here. I left the school. I went, I had a park. Then I came back here. I did the lights. I did them. It's like, okay. She's like, you still have 8 minutes. Well, it's 103 degrees. I didn't stop for lunch. Okay. And I pulled in a 7-Eleven and I got a bottle of water. Aha, we got you. Aha, what? You're using government money to fund your refreshment time. They didn't even take lunch. So that sat with me a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And then I was about 2 weeks from being vested. And a couple other things happened. And I said, you know what? I think I'm going to pull the trigger. It was like a day before Thanksgiving. Because that was the day we were going to be closed. And then that next week I would have been vested. So I went into, let's call it Dina's office. Hey, Dina, you have a minute? Listen, I want to say thank you. Thank you for what? I want to thank you for helping me become a better version of myself and helping you become a better version of yourself. She's like, what are you talking about? Well, today is my very last day. She's like, what? Yeah, you see, I don't think my values and morals are aligning with the government organization that I've been hired by. So you've helped me, and it's helped me realize that it's time for me to start another part of my life and close this chapter. So I am so grateful that I had this opportunity and that I'm able to move on today. You're being stupid. You're going to leave all this money. I see, you know what? The money doesn't really matter. I said, because when I do something that I love, I'm not going to worry about money. She's like, you're crazy. I said, no, I just know what I want, and I'm not going to be manipulated by a government agency. And she
Okay.
just looked at me like I was in another world, right? So I think sometimes people are scared to take that step. But before we do wrap up, Dr. Steve, what would you say is one or two things that you would encourage leaders? Because we always say that leaders are made, not born. What would you encourage someone to say that, let's say they're trying to become a leader, but they're having a challenge? Is there one or two pieces of advice you could give somebody that's tried, but they just don't feel like they can get into those leadership shoes?
Yeah, I think the first thing I would say is go back to what I shared as the definition of a leader. Leader is anybody with influence. Leadership is about focusing on the people. And unless you're working by yourself in your own little room, you're going to be interacting with people. And so that's your opportunity to exercise your leadership skills. You're in that meeting. You use effective listening, use your courageous leadership, use the ability to show your authentic self, and just there's always opportunities to show your leadership experience and to gain experience as well. The other thing I'd recommend is if you're really looking for more of a, hey, I want to lead people, you don't have to get leadership skills just in the workplace. You can volunteer, you can find civic groups, any sort of group that's out there. You can work your way in. And then, of course, depending on how much experience and stuff you have, you can get to a point where you're leading a committee or leading the teams or leading whomever. That's still exercising your leadership behaviors or your leadership competence. And so don't put those opportunities aside and think, oh, I can only become a leader in my workplace where I get a paycheck. Leadership is everywhere. And if you look for those opportunities, you will find a great sandbox to play in.
The greatest box I had that I played, and I wasn't for it in the beginning, but I'm glad that my parents pushed me, was be getting in scouting and becoming an Eagle Scout.
Yeah.
Because that helped shape and mold us. Like we said, leaders are not just born like that. They are made. They've got to go through experiences. And I think people just feel that you're just going to like plop a leader. It doesn't work like that. You've got to go through what went wrong. Why did I fail for 2 years and then get successful? Because I learned what failed. And, what was it that, the gentleman who invented our light bulb, Thomas Edison, he didn't find one way that the light bulb worked. He found 999 ways
Right.
that it would not work. Well, Dr. Steve, it was truly a privilege and a pleasure and an honor to have you on Inspirations for Your Life. And I hope we'll have you come back again. I would love to do a book review on that and really dive deep, because I think this is something that America needs, but I don't think it's something that they're going to get themselves into unless it becomes a problem. So I always say, let's be proactive instead of reactive, because when we're reactive, we break bonds, we destroy bridges, and we also kill opportunity that may not come and knock again.
Diminished trust. You diminish trust.
Trust is definitely key. Thanks so much for joining us. And if they want to learn more about you, Dr. Yacovelli, how can they do that?
Yeah, if you just go to topdoglearning.biz, you'll find information about myself, my team, our books, our training classes, my keynotes, all sorts of fun stuff, and some freebies too. Topdoglearning.biz.
So make the choice, ladies and gentlemen. You can be a leader, but the choice starts with you, not anyone else. We'll see you on the next Inspirations for Your Life show. And we have so much more to talk to you guys about when it comes time to leadership, because it's not just a one-trick pony. There's so much that uncovers the world of leadership. Thank you so much, Dr. Steve.
Take care.